don't forget later. Well, great. It looks like pretty much everybody's here. I've gotten a few questions since Monday, not too many, which is great. That means hopefully people have been having maybe a little bit more success with things. Today, what I'm hoping to accomplish is, so on Monday, we talked about a script that could automate kind of creating an FK joint control system. And in theory, you could use that. It wasn't there on Monday yet. I've added in a couple little bells and whistles and pasted that back into the document that I shared with you guys last time, which would allow you to put an FK control system on whatever you want. So you could do it on the spine, you could do it on the fingers, as well as on the leg or arm. So what you could do in theory is basically start with a fresh copy of your skinned joint model and get a FK rig set up, hopefully with just a couple mouse clicks. So you wouldn't have to make or name controls because the script handles that based on whatever your joints are named. You wouldn't have to position anything, and you wouldn't have to do any parent constraints and worry about constraints getting all goofed up because you clicked the wrong thing first or the wrong thing second. The script is doing that and it's automating that, so it's always putting it in the right order. I've also gone ahead today, and so we did the FK on Monday. Well, I've got a script for IK now. So you could put this on any 3 joints. So if you select the knee or hip, knee, ankle, it would drop an FK control system on the leg. If you selected the shoulder, elbow, wrist, it would drop an IK control system on the arm. And in theory, you could do it on the back, but I would not recommend it for this rig. And I basically, well, I guess some people get used to animating with an IK spine. I don't think it's really all that useful because I don't know how often your upper torso ever controls anything. I feel like with most organic bipedal animation, motion starts in the torso, in the abs, and that's where everything stems from, which to me feels more like an FK control system because you're bending from the up from your pelvis out. So very rarely are you ever going to be driven by your shoulders, and like that's actually what's making things happen. Anyway, so with that being said, I'll go ahead and just mention that lists are helpful. So here is one list that I feel like is a good overview of what we're trying to accomplish with all of our rigging of this biped. So basically, we start with a character that has joints in it that are skinned, and hopefully those joints are oriented in a way that are going to work correctly. That is definitely one of the harder parts, and being able to identify when a joint is in a good place comes with experimentation and trying things out. And I think that many people have seen what will happen if the joint isn't set up in the right orientation or isn't lined up in the right way. You get some unexpected behavior when you start to add in some controls and things like that. So with that being said, that's the jumping off point for where a lot of these scripts jump in. So what the scripts do, or what you do when you're rigging, is you make a duplicate set of joints. You want to organize your rig so that you don't have 1,000 joints sitting all over the place in your outliner. That makes it really hard to keep track of. So you put these joints in a specific place, named whatever you want. I've given one possible naming convention with this gen rig. Then you need to make controls for those joints and place those controls in a specific folder, and also position those controls where they need to be so that they can perform their needed function. So with FK controls, they're usually right on top of the joint because you're mostly just rotating. So you always want it to be kind of located where it needs to, or where it's kind of representing that it's deforming things. With FK, you have that the foot control, or with it would be like a wrist control, but there's also this kind of pointer, so the pole vector constraint. So that control doesn't necessarily sit on top of anything, but it needs to be in a specific place so that the IK doesn't like move the joint to start out with. If you were to put your constraining thing for a pole vector up here and you constrained your elbow, it would want to point at it immediately. So what you want to do is have your control in a neutral position so that when it does get linked, your arm stays completely put. So then once you have the controls positioned, you add constraints to the new joints and controls to get the needed functionality. So with the FK system, that was just parent constraining stuff. With the IK system, you kind of had to split it up in the ankle where you had a point constraint on the IK handle, so you could move it up and down. But then you also needed to add an orient constraint to the ankle joint so that as you picked that handle up and down, you didn't have the foot kind of wobbling around. The foot needs to stay put, or you need to have control over the foot. So that's where that orient constraint comes in. Also the pole vector constraint that I just mentioned. So that's kind of this step. Then what you need to do is go ahead and add in the constraints to the skin from the skin joints or the existing joints to your new joints. So that's a fairly straightforward process. You just select one, select the other, and do a parent constraint. And then the final step is that you need to make sure that this new joint set follows along with the old joint set. So if you were to move the main control and you didn't have like your arm, new arm control joints or your new leg control joints set up in a way to follow that main control, then your leg would just stay put. So you're moving the root around and the leg is just staying put, and it looks like you're pulling the leg off your character. So the final step is just making sure that these new joints follow along with your existing stuff. So if you moved your main controller, then your leg or your arm would follow along. And so hopefully what that will look like in the end is something like this, where you have a main controller. This is your root, and this, all it is your root joint is parent constrained to this thing. So if you move that thing around, it moves around, should move around your whole hierarchy. With this one, the legs are currently set to IK. So if I were to move the waist, then the little feet stay put, and it kind of looks like she's pushing down on the ground or she's squatting or whatever. The arms and everything are set to FK mode. The red is an indication of that, and the yellow is an indication of IK. Like I said, it's nice to be able to just tell at a glance what your control is, and color is a nice way to separate things. So these arms, this clavicle, will follow the chest joint. So if this control scheme wasn't set up to follow the right thing, say for example, this clavicle was following the root controller, it would look correct when I go like this and rotate the root. But if I were to select the chest and rotate this, if it were not set up correctly, then this arm would be staying put, and that would be a problem. So you need to make sure that your control things are set up to follow the right part of your rig. So in the legs case, it's easy because you want the legs to follow the root because that's what they're directly connected to. In the arms case, they're actually connected a couple joints up here to the chest. So that's actually where you would want your FK to follow. And then the IK is slightly different than that, where you have just these two controls. And you can think of your, go ahead and hide the original joint set and show the control joints here. So then with your IK system, so here's a good example of why you want it to be organized nicely. This is a fairly straightforward rig, IK, FK arms, IK, FK legs, and a root control, and that's it. And this is how complicated it's getting. So if you don't have some kind of organizational structure or thought behind how you're keeping track of your rig, it's going to be really, really hard to find and debug things in the future. So that's why I'm recommending that you have these big buckets to start out with that you can just start to put things in. You can obviously add greater granularity in there, where maybe you have inside of your control joints a bucket for FK joints. So you dump everything inside of FK joints that's FK joints and everything, but you don't have to. I've found reasonable success with just having the single bucket. Okay, so here we've got IKR arm. What I'm looking for is right shoulder IK. Pointer there. No. Yep. Okay. So this is my IK control joint, and the IK actually starts at the shoulder. It doesn't start at the clavicle because an IK system only has 3 joints in it: wrist, elbow, and shoulder. So it wouldn't have this clavicle as part of it. So when I actually have my shoulder joint following, you can see here I've got my parent constraint. Oh, I've got a double parent constraint. That's not good. Clavicle joint and oh yeah, no, that makes sense. So here you can see that it's following my clavicle. So it's just a parent constrained to follow the clavicle, and that's how it works. All right. So with that being said, what I'll do is actually go ahead and blow away my entire rig and start from scratch to show how you can use these scripts to really get up and running faster, because all it's doing is automating half an hour of work with a button press. So I'll go ahead and save this scene as example or class example. In case somebody's already copied the original one, I don't want to delete it. All right, so what I'll do is go ahead and come in here, and what you should be able to do with the scripts is basically just clear these out, just delete that, and then delete everything except for the original 2. So I want to leave this. I think it's fairly simple to understand what's going on with this control, which is the root controller. And all it's doing is controlling the root joint. So this is where I'll start. And then I'll also leave my little IK controller here because I think we've gone over how to add a custom attribute a couple times, which is just under edit, add attribute. And for this one, I was adding enums and naming them IK and FK. I'll go ahead and start with everything set to FK, even though that doesn't affect anything. I'll just flip it over, so that's my default state. So at this point, all I would have is a skinned rig. And the few changes that I've made to the FK script since Monday are as follows. So like I said, the assumptions for the script are that my character is named Jen, so I've filled in Jen here. That would be whatever this is. And then also that I have this control joints group, which is here. It's hidden currently. Then also that I have a controls group, which is here. And the last one that I noticed could be or I guess there are 2 more that could be sticking groups. So if you've been naming yours with a different naming convention here with the groups, like I think Zeno actually has all of his control groups, like the nested group structure, it's like just _K. So he actually went in and modified his own script so that that turned into that. That's not necessary. If you've been naming them with the normal naming convention, it should be fine. And then the final thing was just making sure that the root joint, which is, where's my root? There it is. Nope. Where are you? Weird. I guess I'm not doing, oh yeah, I removed that. Okay, never mind. So that's basically the last thing. The other edit that I made is now instead of only selecting the joints that you want to put the controls on, so in this case, if it were a leg, I would have selected the hip, knee, the ankle, and the ball of the foot. I added in one last thing. So the final selection, whatever you click last, is what your FK joint chain will follow. So in this case, the last section I'll make is the root. So what I would want is for this new FK leg to follow the root joint once I'm done. So if I hold shift and select the root and then click my script, it adds in this control joint chain. And if you click and drag this, then your control joint chain actually follows what you need it to follow. So it added in this FK joint system, and then it also added in this FK groups and controls in here. So automates that. So you could repeat that for the leg or the other leg. And then you could even repeat that for the torso if you wanted to. And once you've dropped those in, I'm just dropping them in as neutral like controls. And once you've put them in there, you can come in and kind of customize. Oh, actually, I didn't quite get there. And so because I didn't select the head as part of my spine control system, to get rid of anything, you can just select the control joint, select the control group, and delete it, and then try again if there was something wrong. It looks like, yep, it looks like there was something wrong there because I didn't select the hip joint to end. Okay, okay, cool. And 1, 2, 3, 4. And then what I want this thing to follow is this controller actually instead of a joint. Go ahead and click that. And then once they're in here, what I'd recommend is working when it's the FK system. So if I were to select the root and try and customize the position of stuff by doing the control vertices, you can see how it highlights them all. That makes it a little hard to click on one. So where I'd recommend starting is the last one, because you can work, no, make sure you can't select joints. So you can work kind of out. So I'll rotate and kind of get it out of the way so that then I can click the next one. Rotate
would it be incorrect or like an error to use the like radius size change that's underneath like this
Nope.
inputs? Okay.
No, it's not. So you could, so here in the, I'll go to the line where it's actually set up. So here is where it is setting the radius size for the control. Because I haven't customized this for specific limbs or specific characters, it's just dropping in a default size. If you happen to know what control you're making and you're able to pass in a specific value for the size of control that you want, then that's fine. And you can kind of modify the tool as you go along. So say, for example, you were wanting to make a little control joints for your hands or your fingers here. So you could select, first joint, second joint, third joint, and then I want all of those to follow the little hand here at the beginning. I could edit my little FK script. So instead of making the radius at 1, we'll make it at 0.01 because it's going to be the fingers, so they'll be much smaller. And then go ahead and activate it. Oh, and it looks like it, for whatever reason, the fingers have let this error, which is very frustrating. I wonder if this one. But I guess the important thing to see is it made the control in a little bit more appropriate size. You can always go in and modify it later. So, yeah.
And then when you go in and modify, you just have to make sure like, well,
All,
like it doesn't matter if you modify it after it's already laid, right?
yeah, as long as your modification is doing this, where you do the control vertices, this doesn't change anything on how the controller is going to be behaving with it, like on the rig. You're just modifying its appearance. You're making it easier to select. making it easier to see, or putting it in a position that's like more optimal for animation. So here you can see like this
Well, I guess
is kind of
that's
hard to
like,
grab. What's that?
I guess that's my main question is like if you grab the controller that was just laid and then go over to under inputs and make NURBS curve 19 and click on that and then change the radius that way, is that going to lead to problems in the like in line?
I see. So like here, you're saying?
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
that wouldn't be a problem at all. So you could do
Okay.
0.2 and that'll make it bigger. Yeah, that would be
Okay, cool.
fine too. You won't be able to you could, I guess you could rotate it and stuff using the default.
The normal X, normal Y.
Yeah, the normal X, normal Y's. I don't think you can get, oh yeah, you could even modify this. Okay, so yeah, you could position your stuff using those if you wanted, instead
Okay,
of
cool.
going into this mode and flipping stuff around.
Okay, cool.
Cool. So however you want to customize your controls, I would just make sure that they're easy to find, easy to select, and they're going to work for you when you're doing animation. So with this one, this is the spine one. So I'll have her almost a little bit like it's a hula hoop or something like that. And then, ooh, this one got wonkety. Cool.
Are you
Uh,
going to put the new script that you're using on another
they're,
Google Doc?
yeah, they're both in there currently. So if you look at, oh, my Explorer is on the other window. Here you go. So if you
Okay, I'll
go
check.
into here, the first script, so this is the FK, you can see making an FK control joint chain. And then a little bit lower, you can see script for making an IK control chain.
Oh, awesome.
And
Okay.
keep in mind that the way that this functions is, go ahead and get rid of these. Looks like stuff is, oh, I can't. The way that these function, wow, that's really weird. For the FK is you put whatever joints you want in your FK chain, starting with the root. So it would be like, you know, hip, knee, ankle, ball joint, or spine one, chest, neck, head. And then the last thing that you select is whatever it will follow. So that is how you will want to work with the script.
And that'll naturally parent it correctly?
It will, yes. So if you get, like you saw on the finger, oh no,
Mm-hmm.
what is happening here? This is very odd. Get rid of that. Let's see. Why is this joint? It's very weird. For some reason, this joint got spun. Okay. All right. So that's kind of the FK script. If you're able to get that running, you can save some work there. The other one is the IK script. And so how that works is pretty much the same, where you select the first joint, second joint, third joint. And that's all you would want for any IK system. It's always just 3 joints. And then whatever you want it to follow last. So I want it to follow the root, and then you just hit IK, and it will drop in an ankle effector or an ankle joint that moves that, and it also rotates the foot. And then it also drops in your knee aim. So, or basically your pole vector constraint, so that you can get that working too. It should work on whichever chain you put it on. So here's the elbow. Oh, okay. So here's a good good example of needing to modify the script a little bit just because it's a blanket script. So at some
Hey,
point,
JP,
yeah.
I was just wondering if I could ask a question about orienting my offset groups.
Or like the
So
controls.
before, yeah, so like before
Okay.
I was doing like, I had my two groups. I'd pick my group. I guess first I would pick my joint, then my groups, and then I would do maintain offset parent, and it would angle it correctly, but it's no longer angling it. Is there something that I'm like forgetting?
So what you're wanting to do is position your stuff right on top of something else. Is that right?
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, the maintain offset is what you would, so if you don't want something to move, you have maintain offset checked. That means maintain whatever the current position is. If you do want it to move, you
Okay.
make sure that's not checked.
Okay, maybe that's where I've been getting it wrong.
Okay, cool. So here, in this script, how it's putting things in the world is for this aiming, for the pole vector constraint, it moves it just in world space. And where that line is actually it's right here. I'll go ahead and put in a comment. So this is, I move the pole vector target. And so it moves it in world direction, which is WD. And it's currently set to move it in a, I think by default, it's in a positive. So it'll move it forward, which in this world is this way. So if I move it forward, you can see here in the little readout, it said move ROS world direction, and then in the Z direction, it has a positive number. If I were to move it backwards like that, you can see that now it has a negative number there for the move direction. So with these arms, I actually want to get them to go backwards. So this would be where you could kind of modify the script just a little bit to function correctly for the current limb that you're on. So with the legs, you want the control to go forward. With the arms, you want it to go backward. So you could come in and edit your script by finding that specific line here, move, and just typing negative there instead. So for this joint chain, select shoulder, elbow, wrist, and then the clavicle is what I want it to follow. Then go ahead and hit IK. And now it puts the aim thing back there so that when I'm doing my animation, it functions more correctly. Cool, so I'll pause there. We went over like how to by hand set up the IK control system. And I wonder now if there are any questions or I guess issues that have come up since Monday, if people have been dropping in IK and it's not functioning right. Any issues there before I kind of move on to just going ahead and putting the two control schemes on this character and then setting up the set driven keys.
I had a question, just kind of, I hadn't laid any more IKs out because I'd just been doing the FKs and I didn't want to I felt like I wanted to wait. But with the FKs, does it matter? So I laid out my arm FKs, but I haven't done the spine. Should I delete the arm ones that I've done and do the spine first? Probably
No.
just to
You can do them in whichever order you want.
Okay.
The way that we're doing things is because we're creating this functionality on these duplicate joint things. You don't necessarily have to have anything else in place before you start to work on that. So if you wanted to do your spine first, you could do that. If you wanted to do your left arm first, you could do that. It's just if you're using the scripts, the last thing you select is what it will follow. So if for whatever reason you wanted it to follow a control instead of a joint, then maybe the order would have to be a certain way. So if I wanted my IK thing to actually follow a shoulder control, then I would need to have made the FK system first. But that would be, I guess, the more complicated answer.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
No problem.
Oh, and then one other question. Should every joint have an FK on it, except for the toe?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
On this character, yeah. Yeah, I guess except for the twist joints, they don't need FK stuff.
Okay.
Awesome.
All right, thank you.
So at this point, I've got an IK on the leg, and then you can pretty much put right on top of your IK or your FK using the script, or you should be able to. Go ahead and start from scratch. Oh, right, because I changed the script to have little tiny controllers. So I'm going to change that back to 0.1 instead of 0.01 so that I can actually see them because they're going to be on top of limbs. So if I were to start from scratch and I just want to turbo through this, I would go limb by limb and just add in each control scheme and follow the pelvis for an IK. So now that I've got both of those, I could go ahead and set up my switch as I go along. So first thing I'll do is go ahead and unzip this leg so that I can get at the constraints, because I will need to make sure that those are visible so I can add them in the set driven key menu. So get my switcher, my switch controller, go to right leg method. Is the thing that I'm going to be keying here. I want to make sure to add in each of the constraints that are on my skinned joint. So I've got my hip, knee, ankle, and ball. Make sure that this is, I know what value this is currently set at. So it's currently set the right leg method to IK. So I'll go ahead and key the IK first. So I'll select these constraints, or actually you can select them by clicking here as well. Make sure that the FK is set to 0 each time. And there's only FK on the toe, but I'll make sure to turn that off. Okay, so now that those are all set correctly, I know that this is on IK. I can highlight these two values and hit key. Highlight these two. And key. Then I'll flip this. And reverse these. So my first time through setting the keys, what I'm doing is setting the constraint behavior. So I'll actually go through 2 times, because the second time through, I'll set the visibility of stuff. Oh no, when I made it, I didn't flip this back. Dang it. All right, 1 second. Let me go ahead and So back to neutral. I want to make sure that the script pushes things forward because it's leg. Here, okay. And okay, cool. Make sure these are put into my driven. Sorry, this part is very tedious, but important, and you should only have to do it once in theory. Okay. Oh no, and I did it backwards. Go ahead and key it the correct way this time. All right, I'll flip this to FK. One, zero, key. And key. Okay, so we can test out, make sure that things are functioning correctly. We're currently in FK mode, so if I rotate this, everything seems to be working correctly. If I flip this over to IK mode, and I should only be able to control stuff using the IK controls. Yep, so we're good there. So now the second time through, what I'm going to do is all the visibility of my controllers. So I'll go ahead and highlight both the FK and the IK controllers. Oops, did not mean to hit any more keying, but that's okay. So drop them in as the driven. All of them have the visibility attribute, which is really nice. That makes keying a little more straightforward. But we are currently on IK mode. So I will select all my FK controllers and hide them and hit key. Then flip this over to FK, highlight both my IK controllers, hide them, and you can actually get at each of the different controllers by selecting them here in your set driven key. So if you grab your FKs, you can actually flip all of them back on. Make sure that you're highlighted on everything. Visibility is highlighted and you hit key. So now when you go back and forth, you're flipping the visibility and the functionality of your rig. So once I have that, I would go in and take the time to actually customize the appearance of stuff. So I'll turn off my joint selection, snap this down so it's actually on the ground. I find that to be a more useful position for foot controls. Maybe that looks a little bit more like the foot. You can always turn back on the geometry to help you figure out if that's good. Tighten this up a little bit. Good there. And then I like to make my targets a little bit different shape. So I'll maybe turn them into more of a square. Shrink them down a little bit. So that's what I'm gonna make my target. So I've got those controls looking good. So I'll flip over to the FK and customize these. So here's a couple tricks for getting different shapes just out of a sphere or out of a normal circle. You can kind of get a semicircle by highlighting kind of the bottom half of stuff and scaling them all so they're flat. So now this is, I think, a little bit more useful for putting it on the ground. It doesn't cut into stuff like that. But I'll keep it out of the way for now so I can easily grab this controller without accidentally selecting stuff on another controller. Then kind of rotate this guy, scale him so that it's closer on the knee. And then with hips, they're a little tricky because it's such a big volume. I tend to kind of put it next to, similar to how fingers are, I put it over to the side. And that tends to work pretty well. Might scoot it down just a little bit so that when you do this rotation, the control doesn't automatically cut into the body and you kind of lose visibility on it. So kind of down and over to the side should get you easy selectability on the FK controller for the hip. Cool, so this is basically one limb setup. And although it was painful to watch the set-driven key section, it only took, 5-6 minutes, which is a little faster than doing it by hand, I would say. Let's see. So I will warn, I'm not sure why it's happening, but I was able to kind of power through and eventually get it to do what I wanted to do. But when I was using the FK script on the fingers, it should function exactly the same. But it kept making a duplicate of a duplicate for some reason. So if I select pointer, 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 hand, so what I want is these 3 digits to follow the hand joint, and I hit FK. Okay, so that time it worked. I don't know why sometimes it does weird stuff, sometimes it doesn't. I found much better success selecting here in the outliner, so I know exactly what I am selected on. Once you get that in place, oops. And actually, I'll go ahead and move them all up at once. And then if you had gone in and kind of modified the original size of your control before you built them, that would help save a little bit of work here. But it is possible to kind of work through and just leave it at the default value if you don't want to worry about stuff. All right, so once you have those in place, you can turn character back on, see if that'll be helpful. Yeah. Yeah. And if I rotate the wrists, the fingers should follow because hand is under the wrist. So that's using the same FK script from the leg on the finger. You could do the same thing on the spine. So I've already got a control here on the root. So I'm not going to add another control on the root. I'm going to start here at spine 1, chest, neck, head, then parent all of those to the root and hit FK. Get this out of the, get this out of the way. I'll actually leave the lady on. That's a decent spot for the head. Oftentimes with the neck, I'll actually shift it up, kind of rotate it a little bit so it's almost a little bit like a necklace. And then maybe even grab one or two of the controls that and give it a little bit of a different shape so it follows contour a little bit. Can't see the inside right now because of controls are too small. Spin it, blow it up a little bit, spin this one. Blow it up a little bit. There you go. And if at any point things go horribly wrong and it's not looking good, or you're like, oh man, this is kind of not, I'm not able to work with this. The nice part about scripts is because they work so fast, sometimes it's really easy to just wipe and start from the beginning. So if you get to a point where maybe the spine controls have gone haywire or the leg controls have gone haywire, you can just kind of delete and start from scratch. Like I said, you just clear out the controls, clear out the control joints, and you should be able to start and work from the scripts right at the beginning. Hopefully you won't have to do that too many times, because this, you know, you get really far down the road, you've customized a couple control shapes, you don't want to clear those out. That's also a true statement. Cool. So are there questions on, I guess, how you would take the script from the doc and get it working in your scene? Or would you like me to run through that once? Or are you guys comfortable with, you know, pasting it and getting it to work?
I do have a question. Like, how did you title it? See how your little buttons now have FKIK?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, good,
Right.
good question. So it's just under. So if you click on any of these, you can right click on it and say edit, and then where it says shelves here, you can put a little icon label. So this one I just called FK, and then said save all shelves, and it saved FK to there.
Okay, cool.
Mm-hmm. Actually went a little faster than expected, which is good. So basically that's the process that I used to get to what the current rig is, the gen rig in my folder. That gen rig, you can see, has has FK and IK on both arms and legs, and it has FK on the spine, and it has FK on all the fingies. It's also set up so that you could, if you wanted to, set up your macros like how you did in your first project. So you could set up your fist or point or thumbs up or anything you want on the hand, because it should function exactly like the other hand in the other project.
And all your methods are are connected to that one controller in the back, right? The little bow tie controller.
Mm-hmm.
Or it's
Yeah.
like a shape
So
of a bow tie.
I added in these couple extra attributes by just doing the add attribute. It was set to enum. This is my new attribute, and is thing one, and clicked here, thing two, and then I just hit add. So that added it up here. So I added leg method IKFK by typing in these fields, and that's how I linked it up. And you
Okay,
can
cool.
always get rid of attributes too. If you don't like that, you just go edit, delete attribute, and it'll get rid of it.
Okay.
Cool.
And then the new IK script,
Mhm.
did you go through and add notes like you did for the FK so we can try to understand that the scripting
I
code?
believe I did. So the first part of the script is exactly the same as the FK1, where this is the logic that I used to duplicate the joint chain. Then, yeah.
Okay, cool.
Mm-hmm. It functions a little differently because the FK script could be, in theory, infinite joints long, or it could be 100 joints long if you want. So it does that for loop where it goes through and does the same thing to every joint. Because the IK system is only ever going to be with 3 joints, I do a couple sections where I do OBJ 2, 0, 1, or 2. So if you see that, so OBJ 0 would be the first thing you selected, OBJ 1 would be the second thing, and OBJ 2 would be the third thing. So if you're doing a leg, the third thing would be your ankle, the second thing would be your knee, and the first thing would be your hip. So
Okay.
that's what those variables are. Let's see, are there any other tricky? Oh yeah. So the other new line is here, where so this is the Mel script for doing a IK handle. So you say IK handle, you give it a name, you pass in the starting joint, which is SJ, and then you pass in the end joint, which is going to be set. Let's see, I put it up here. So the end name, I get the end name root by looking at the third thing selected, and then tack on the IK joint because I know that that's how I named it. Then I make sure to specify that the solver is the rotation plane, which is RP, rotation plane solver. So that sets up your IK handle on those 2 joints, or basically those are the selected joints that you did.
Okay. And then the pole.
The pole vector is down a little bit more. I guess this is the line where I'm constraining the IK handle to the IK controller, and I guess I should say the position of the, and then the rotation of the joint to the control. So these are the 2 constraints that you have to set up on an IK controller, where you're point constraining the IK handle to the control, and you're orient constraining the joint to the control, because you can't get the IK handle doesn't handle any rotation. All it does is position. So you have to do that separate constraint so that when you pick your foot up, your foot doesn't just kind of spin without any control over it. So then later, this is where the pole vector constraint comes in. And it's pretty straightforward. There's no fanciness. It's just pole vector constraint. And you say that you want the handle, the IK handle, to follow your control, which is the middle name root, which is your knee. So the knee IK control to the IK handle will be pole vector constraint to the pole vector constraint to the knee control. And what might happen, you may see if you're doing a custom rig and you have a slight variation in your joints, maybe they're not lined up or they're not oriented 100% correctly, you might see that knee not be right in front, that it might be off to the side, and your pole vector might behave a little strange. So if you are seeing that, the reason might be something like So a couple people did have a question about this, where their joints okay, so theater of the mind, here is, say this is your leg joint setup that you've put inside your skin. Slightly like this and slightly like that. At first glance, it might look like it's straight up and down and everything should be functioning correctly. And what you would expect when you drop a pull vector in here is that the knee is going to bend straight forward and backwards. But because this joint is not necessarily aimed correctly, so see how it's not really aimed at the knee. This joint isn't really aimed at the ankle. And if you look at your joints from kind of the front view, a very old school way or is to just use the grid to line stuff up. So we'll switch this back to world. So you can see if I position it right on top of this gray line and then zoom in on one of these joints, you can see that this joint is not on top of that gray line, and nor is this joint. And what that would cause is a kind of variation in the direction that this IK handle would bend. If you didn't want that to happen, you need to make sure that your joints line up in a straight line in one direction. So because I'm looking at it from the front, that would mean that if they all lined up, it would go forward and backwards. If you lined it up from the side, it would go side to side, so on and so forth.
What does that mean for the arms then?
So the way that this character is set up is that I've got it lining up kind of flat. So this shoulder joint, wrist joint, and elbow joint fall in a straight line like that. So that means that when the IK handle deforms it, because it has this little bit of a bend in it, the elbow goes straight backwards in the Z direction.
Okay, that makes sense.
Okay.
So from the front, they should always be straight. And then from the side, they have a little bit of a bend to denote the direction.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay.
Cool. So at this point, I'll pause and ask for any questions relating to getting the script set up. We'll do the same kind of thing at the end of class where if you hang out and you work and you're trying out things, if you have questions, you can ask. But I was going to do a quick demo on actually installing a third-party script, which is something as an animator you'll probably do a lot of, even if you're not coding. You don't necessarily need to know how to code to use third-party stuff, because hopefully somebody's done all the heavy lifting and all you have to do is click a button. So the one that we're going to get set up is enormously helpful for animation. And it does something very simple, which is create an outline so that you can use it for reference. Onion skinning is something that's a term in animation, which basically means you can see before the current frame or after the current frame. And when you were doing 2D animation, they would have that like really thin paper, and they would like flip the paper and you could see the drawing before, and that's how they would kind of space things out. Now that we have all these fancy digital tools, you can do that in different ways. In 3D, Maya has added in some like ghosting stuff, which, yeah, it works kind of good, I guess. Go ahead and turn it on so you can see what's going on. So if I have my arms flap like a bird. So our arms are flapping up and down. So if I select my skin, And I come up here to visualize. And so here's my ghosting options. I can say ghost selected like that. And so now that it's turned on, you can see like this kind of pink version of the skeleton. So this kind of shows me the blue is previous and the pink is the next frame. So you could maybe see some problems or issues with the spacing. It kind of works. Maybe if you got used to it, you could really start to identify issues or use this as a tool for different things. For blocking out and setting so the other thing to keep in mind with this is it's very much paying attention to settings. So right now it's looking forward 3 frames and backwards 3 frames. So anything that happens after that, I can't see. So I actually like a lot more control over all of that stuff. And what I use is this little script that has this funny little Pac-Man guy called BH Ghost. So with that thing selected, if I turn on the script, you can add or subtract meshes. And then you can just hit a button anytime you want to save an outline of something that's here. So say I wanted to save this pose, you just hit the ghost button and you can turn up or down the stroke width. So you can turn it all the way down. I'm in centimeters, that's probably good. And then you can change the color to white. So this is actually what you can use to kind of line stuff up. And I don't have to worry about like what frame I'm on. I think it's way more helpful to kind of save a pose and just have it there so that you can use that as a target and reference no matter what frame you're on. And if you ever want to get rid of it, you can say bust all. Or if you know exactly what frame you were on when you made that, you can say just bust one. I'll go ahead and clear that out. So we're going to run through getting something like this set up. It's very, very easy. Or hopefully it'll be easy. You can see that this actually only has a single line command here. The reason being is that we've put all the fanciness as a mel script, which is actually a file type, and put it in a certain folder in Maya so that when Maya boots up, it has it in memory, and all you have to do is run this one command, and it will activate this menu, this handy dandy little menu, and all the functionality will be ready to go. So go ahead and go into so if you're on Windows, the location of your scripts folder is in Documents, Maya, whatever year you're in. So I'm in 2020, and then Scripts. So this is actually where you would drop any mel file. So you can see right now I've got, or actually there's another place you can put it. I apologize. So you can either put it in your scripts folder or you can put it in your prefs scripts folder. And here's my BH Ghost. And I'll copy that and go ahead and drop it in the Google Drive so you guys can have it. Cool. So if you are currently working on a file, make sure to save it because you'll need to close Maya once you've got it in the right folder and then open it because Maya boots stuff up in memory each time it opens. So if you are on Mac, I know it has a different file location for the script. So let me quick do a Google search for that. Mac Maya scripts folder. Okay, so it looks like it's Home, Library, Preferences, Autodesk, Maya, and then Year Prefs. So this is the location. Cool. All right. pause there for a second in case people are following along and they are installing this as we speak. If you're not following along or you're going to do it later, that's totally cool. Or you're not going to do it at all. I wouldn't recommend that. It's always good to know how to do this kind of thing. Actually, what I'll do is I'll wait for a couple thumbs up if people have grabbed the script and put it somewhere. Or if you just want me to continue. Cool. Gotten about half the thumbs up. So I will move to the next step. So what you need to do for the next step is just know what command to run so that the script can actually do what you want it to do. The easiest way I've found is to actually just open it using your script editor and look for a specific thing. Or if it's a good script, it should have some documentation at the top, which will tell you exactly what to do. So for this one, we'll go ahead and say open script. Go to my prefs, scripts, ghost, and open. And that'll automatically open a new little mel tab, and it will have all the good stuff. And thank goodness this is a well done script, or whoever made it is a thoughtful person. So here you can see to use, wham. Just type bhghost. That's all you got to do, or bhghost without the quotes and the semicolon. So this is the command that would actually get it to run. So all you would have to do, highlight that little thing there, middle mouse drag it up to your shelf, you can edit that, ghost, save all shelves. Now, if you click that, it'll boot up your little menu. Now, I'll look for a thumbs up to see if somebody actually got that to work. Actually, you probably would have had to restart Maya, so never mind. I guess if you don't want to restart Maya and you want to keep following along, this is an option. This is some fancy stuff. Down in the mel thing, just type rehash. That'll force it to reload anything in its scripts folder, and it should work after that. So there is some method to this madness. The reason that I'm suggesting getting this script installed is specifically to work around one of the harder things that this model is currently up against, which is the IK-FK switch. So like I said, if you have had your character posed in some way and you wanted to switch over to the other control scheme, when you do so, you're going to get a bit of a pop because it goes to where the controls, the other set of controls was before. And you can't really get it to follow along as you go, just because then your control schemes would be kind of dependent on each other, and that's going to break how they work. So to counter that, what you could do, have your character in whatever pose it's in, and use this fancy little script to save that as a reference point, so that if you are on a different frame or you do flip this back to the other control scheme, you still have your reference. So you can use that to kind of line up where your character was, so that maybe between frames it could move in, it'll look like it's moving into that position seamlessly. And I will wait for a thumbs up and I'll go into an example and actually work through doing that once I see a few of those. Okay, got 3 thumbs up. 4, 5. All right. So go ahead and start to set up. So say what I'm going to try and do is make it feel like this character is getting up and pushing on a table while they're getting up. So this will be their little proxy seat. So that's the table. Cool. So these are my props that the character would be interacting with. You can spend more or less time making them. You could also just have, like I've got, oh, it says my internet's unstable. I'll pause for a second. Okay, looks like I'm back. So you could just know and treat these as targets and replace them with fancy assets later. So if you wanted to make a super awesome table, there's no reason why you couldn't animate with this here. And as long as your fancy table had the exact same positioning as your little floaty table, there's no reason why your animation wouldn't still look good. So that's one way of working and making progress, or delegating work, where if you were working with somebody, you could have one person animating and one person doing set. And this would be your start, where you have basically targets. So this is my animation. I know my character is going to be sitting. I know it's going to be using this table to push on. And while I'm animating that, my partner is making a super awesome chair and a super awesome table and a floor and a rug and windows and all that kind of stuff. And in the end, you can just reference in your animation into a brand new scene, and it would all come together like magic. So with that being said, let's get this going. So positioning character using stepped keyframes is what I'll be doing here. The other thing that I'll be doing is making a little button so that I can quickly select everything, or actually I'll just do a drag select. Make that easier. So to be able to do drag select, you want to make sure to turn off joint selection and turn off mesh selection, so that when you drag over top of stuff, it only grabs the controls. And right now I have 2 keyframes, but I'll go ahead and hit S to lock in that keyframe, right click on my timeline and say stepped. Delete this one. Come forward a few frames. It doesn't matter at this phase what my spacing is, because all I'm doing is blocking in key pose animation. So this pose, I'll go ahead and maybe relax the shoulders a little bit. So here you can see I'm selecting 2 controls at once, activating the rotate tool and rotating it. And so this is where doing the mirror joints is paying off. So because, or if you did use mirror joints, their behavior is mirrored. And so that means that when you rotate the left elbow, the right elbow would actually bend in the way that you would expect. If they didn't have mirrored like orientation, then when you would select those 2 controls, they would kind of, they'd bend opposite, which is annoying. So it's nice for being able to position 2 sides at once to have the controls behave in that way. Cool. So rotate maybe you're forward a little bit, looking up. This will obviously be rough. So let's say this is my first pose. Boom. Then at pose 10, this will be when the character will like put both of her hands on the table. So for that, I'll actually flip my hands both over to IK. I haven't moved these yet, so they're still in their original position, which is zeroed out. The arms can only extend this long because there's no stretchy limbs on this character. So once you move the control back into distance, the arm will function correctly. So if you see that on your character, don't worry, that's to be expected. You would need additional fanciness, bells and whistles to get stretchy arms. And you may not want stretchy arms because maybe you're doing a more realistic animation versus a cartoony animation. Then position the elbow using the target. Cool. So maybe pick the thumb up out of the. It looks pretty flat here. So make sure this is stepped. Make sure this is stepped. So I've got my character popping. Oh, did I not save my first frame? I don't think I did. Oh, this hasn't been getting keyed. So, oops. You can see I was drag selecting over top of here, and that meant that I wasn't ever keying this. The switch also needs to get keyed. So when I started my character, I wanted both my arms to be in FK, like that. So for this first frame, I'll hit S to key that. And at frame 5, there's also a keyframe. Then at frame 10, this is actually when it flipped over into IK. Like that. I'll make sure that these are all stepped too. Sorry about that. Sorry if that was confusing. But so here at frame 0, it's arms out to the side, nice and neutral. And then the arms are now up on the table. And you can see that it flipped from FK mode to IK mode.
When we did the hand animations, at every single key, we highlighted everything to make sure that it was keyed correctly. Do we do that again? I can't tell if we're doing that.
So we'll say for this project, yes. I think this is a good way to work because what you can do if you've highlighted everything, you know exactly that this is very much, if you were to think about it in traditional animation terms, this would be a key pose. So you could think of this as a drawing. And you just made your drawing by positioning your puppet. So when you highlight all your controls, you're effectively saving that moment in time so that you know if you do have transitions, it's going to be transitioning the whole body from this pose, the whole body to this pose. And if you didn't have all your controls selected, then that means that you only have this partial stuff going on. And the next stage of the process that I would highly recommend doing is basically, so here I've just got 2 poses. Maybe I'll go ahead and add in a third pose just for demonstration purposes. So this has just this basic timing of every 5 frames it does stuff. So when I play it back, it has that rhythm. But what you can do is drag things around on the timeline and space stuff out as big chunks of information. And if you didn't have your entire character like your whole character wasn't keyframed all at once, then you would be leaving behind some things and only moving some other things. So when you go and you start to smooth your animation, it's probably not going to behave as expected. So for this project, I would highly recommend keyframing your entire character rig, anything that's visible.
Okay, cool.
Okay, cool. So here the character is like that. So let's say that there's a frame maybe around here where they're still in FK mode, but their hands are picked up above the table. As though she's about to put them down again. And actually this is a all right, so now I've got this pose here. Switch to step. This is why it's better to work in a specific mode. So each time I'm laying a keyframe down, I'm actually having to go in and set that keyframe to stepped, which I've gotten used to. But when you're first getting things going, it's nice to let Maya drop in stepped keyframes, so they're always stepped keyframes when you're using this workflow. Okay, so here we're in FK and here we're in IK. So if I were to right click on this keyframe and start to blend it, so using auto, you can see that some things looks like maybe are selected and some things aren't. Oh dear. Cool. Oh my goodness. Somebody okay?
I drank water down the wrong way.
Oh, gotcha. All right. So in general, what you want to have happen is your switch happens in a single frame. So on one frame, you are on IK mode, and then on the next frame, you've switched over to another mode. So if I know that this is the first frame where my hands are going to be touching the table, I would want to make sure to have my switch selected. There is a keyframe there, so the switch right before, these would still be in FK mode. And you can select your controller again, hit S. So you can see that the switch happens in a single frame. There's no blending between the two. But the problem is so on this frame, you would want to be as close to this as possible, or basically in some believable line of lining up with that. So I'm going to use my script, selecting the mesh, activating that, go ahead and hitting ghost, making sure the stroke isn't gigantic. That's what this slider is it controls the width of that stroke. If you're not seeing that, it could also be here under show. You don't have strokes active. So make sure that strokes are active for the script. Cool. So I know that this is the target that I'm aiming for. And if I come in here, then I can use that to help try and line up kind of per section of limb. Extend the elbow. Rotate that. So then with these three selected, or with everything selected, I should say, turn back off polygons. Select all my controls, hit S, so that now it's blending into when it switches. Okay, pause there. Is the frame rate good enough that you guys could see as I go back and forth, or as if I step through the animation, what's happening? So the hand started here in FK mode. Oop, looks like I've got some chat messages. Okay. I'm not good at chatting. What does an upward caret mean? Okay. Yeah, so I'm just stepping through it frame by frame. So it started here, FK, going forward 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's still in FK. And then this is the frame when it switches over. Boom, like that. Oh, thank you. Cool. I'm learning stuff. I'm not old. All right. So that's kind of that would be the process that I would go through to try and blend between that switch. So now at this point, you could have your character stand up or do some kind of new body position using the new controls that really benefit from the new control scheme, because it would be really hard to position by hand those things staying put. So maybe it looks like she's really pushing on the table here. Like that. Go ahead and highlight all that stuff. Key it. Now it looks like she's kind of pushing on the table a little bit. And she could just as easily push on the chair or something else if that's a more believable animation. But I think it was Derek requested this as a demonstration. Does this answer some questions for flipping back and forth?
Yeah, it does.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. All right, so we are now about 10 minutes before 12. And I thought that I might, so the thing I was going to animate is just a character like doing a jump and swing on like a bar and like do a flip and land, because that would have an IK switch in it for the hands and also the feet. So I was going to kind of block those out in poses, then block them out in time, just staying in that stepped mode, and then start to smooth stuff out in this remaining time. So as I'm working or as I'm getting things in position, then please ask questions on anything I'm doing. Sorry, the frame rate isn't super fast, but actually we could, I think my computer can handle this. So I can go ahead and boot up Twitch stream. I'll put it in the chat, and you guys could open up a Twitch view of how I'm working if you wanted, so that you could see, like, you know, per click at the sweet gamer level of refresh rate, 60 frames a second.
Are you gonna keep it recording now?
Yeah. Yep.
Cool.
I have a couple like random questions, but I don't know the best time to ask them.
Then ask away.
I don't know the difference between point or orient constraints.
Okay,
really.
So yeah, point constraint only does translates, and orient constraints only do rotates. So if you, so here I've got two objects. So if I or if I point constrain this sphere to this sphere, if I moved this one, it would follow along. If I rotated this one, see how the other one is not rotating?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's because this thing you can see only has these 3 blue channels, which means it's only gonna follow position. It'll only follow the translate.
Okay.
Alternatively, you could only do a rotate. So with this selected, then this, constrain orient. So now if I move this around, this thing stays put, but if I rotate it, it follows along.
Okay, cool.
Mhm.
Awesome. That's really straightforward.
Yeah.
Then the other random question I had
Mhm.
was when you're moving around your IK, but really any controller, there's those little tiny squares that you've been using to move it sometimes. Why are those there? Just to kind of help with moving things?
When I'm moving
Like
around,
one's yellow, one's blue. They're like they're like with the controls, but they're like tiny little squares. One is yellow, one is blue, and one is red.
right. Okay. Yeah, no, that's a very good question. So those little squares will basically move this object in 2 directions versus only one. So if you grab the arrow that moves it left and right, or it moves it in the X direction, I guess currently, I can't move it up or down, or I can't move it forward and back, right? If you grab the
Yeah.
one that's in between, you can do them both. And you
What?
don't have to,
Okay.
yeah, you don't have to worry about it going up or down if you were to grab this one, right? Because that's not part of those two. Alternatively, you could move it only up and down and forward and backwards, then it doesn't go side to side. Or if you're on the last one, you could do up or down and side to side, but not forward and backwards.
And
Okay.
never move it from the middle.
Yeah,
Never
moving from the
move from
middle in this view is dangerous. I will
It's
say
pure chaos.
it introduces madness. I will say though, if you do like grabbing from the middle controller, you can do that in these views. So that's what these views are really powerful for. So if you're in the side view and you grab the middle, it still is only ever going to do in those 2 directions, because that's all this view can do. Same with the front. You could go up or down and side to side from the middle. And then from the top, you can go forward and back and side to side.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. But yeah, that's a good question. I would have never thought to, and that can work with all your tools. The other one that I use it a bunch with is scaling. So if I hold, actually, this is another little trick. If you hold Control and you click on one of the kind of directions, it will only scale it in the other 2, if that makes any sense. So if I hold Control and click the top one, it won't scale it vertically, but it'll scale it horizontally and widthwise.
Okay.
So if you get used to doing that, then you can like real quick scale stuff in interesting ways.
Okay, cool.
Mm-hmm. All right, so let me double check on the rig. And I think Twitch. I think that is the stream that I set up last semester for After Effects animation, because getting good frame rates is important for critiques. Right, so it looks like Jen is working. So open up the scene. So as I said before, if you're setting up an animation scene, it's good to just start with a new empty one, go to File, Reference Editor, hit the plus sign, find your rig, and reference it in. And then immediately save as your animation. So this is going to be called Gen Flip. Since this is a new scene, I don't have my texture view activated, so you can just click that and it should turn on because I'm still set up correctly with my project view. All right, so I'm going to get my flip going here. Oh yeah.
Hey Kirby, on your macros for FK, IK, and Ghost up on the top on your toolbar, how did you put the titles there again?
These guys?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, just go edit, right click on it, sorry, and then say edit,
Yep.
go to shelves, and then it's this icon label field. And then you save all shelves.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Ooh, that's disturbing. It's like my paint weights in my head aren't great. The teeth are poking through. Ugh. Leave that for now. I guess another thing that I guess as I'm going, maybe I'll have some stream of consciousness, just workflow suggestions. You don't have to use them. In general, the mode that I use for IK controls, I tend to leave them in world space. It makes positioning much, much easier. So here you can see if I did this as like object space and I tried to move it around, it kind of is weird because I'm just looking to point it in a specific direction. I like to just leave it in world space and use the like these in between handles like we just covered to get them where I want them. You don't have to, just preference. All right, it's pretty good. So that whole first thing was just getting a single pose set up. Oh, DL. What does that mean?
That was an accident. Sorry.
Okay. Does the Twitch link work if people have clicked on it?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, it
Okay,
works.
cool.
Mine's delayed a bit, but it works.
Yeah, I think Twitch is about 5 seconds, and that's so that they can maintain a constant frame rate. It's one of the tricky things about doing critiques. Usually I'll just start an animation, let it run a few times so people can see it without having to open it up on their own computer. But it is kind of hard to be like, right here, you can see, because whoever's watching is 5 seconds behind what I'm seeing. It's a little annoying. All right, tangents. Let's go ahead and stretch this person out. So there you can see I was trying to spin the whole thing backwards and it was in object mode, and it does weird stuff like that. So it's nice to just be in world mode. Oops. Don't need my fingers selected. pretty good. So you can, with fingers, they're often something that take a ton of time. You can copy finger stuff over to other fingers. So you can see I've highlighted all my fingers. If you, and then hit keyframe. So now I've got this keyframe here. If you copy that by right clicking on it, say copy, you can highlight all your other finger joints. Make sure that you don't have extra stuff selected and hit paste. And that didn't work at all. Oops. I wonder why. Oh, okay. Yeah, so here's so the hand, I think I didn't spend a lot of time being careful. So I think I didn't mirror the joint stuff. So this hand is unique to this hand. So on this rig, that's an example of a problem. And you'll have to work around if you use this guy. You have to position the fingers individually, unfortunately. All right, so it's looking pretty good. A little swoop. Oh. It's got hops. Jesus. We'll put in a little trampoline. Yeah. There. Looks like charge up. Oopsie doopsie. So you can see, basically I started out with everything. I guess this is a tip about the second part of what I was doing. So I laid out, I guess, 7 key poses, one every 5 frames. I just spaced them out totally evenly. And then because I'm working with everything in blocks, I basically made sure to highlight all my controls, which means that if I did any switching, I need to make sure that I've selected both the IK controls and the FK controls. Because if I was here at the beginning and I did a big drag select, you can see that my arms are currently set to FK. If I did that and started dragging frames around, then I wouldn't be dragging my IK frames around either. So I need to make sure to go to a frame where I know I've switched, and holding Control and Shift at the same time, you can see how my mouse now has a plus sign right next to it. That means that it will always add. So that if you hold Shift and you drag over top of things, it toggles it. So if it is selected, it deselects it. If it's not selected, it selects it. But if you hold Shift and Control, then it always selects it. So you force add all stuff. So the FK legs are active here and the IK arms are active here. So I want to make sure to grab those by holding Shift and Control. And then now I know I've got both the FK arms and the IK arms, the FK or the IK legs and the FK legs all selected. So with that selected, I can confidently drag around my keyframes and start to retime things. Here, I've got a frame where I've just kind of like, oh, let me adjust this a little bit. It's not looking very good. Here we go. I've got a foot, which here is down, and she's just started to take off, and then she's in the air. And that was originally spaced 5 frames apart, and that felt a little slow because you want this to have a lot of energy. So the takeoff and in the air, I basically put 2 frames apart. So it feels like she pops off the ground a little faster. When you play it back at speed, it feels like she's got energy in her legs and is jumping. I did a similar thing with popping off of this thing, which I'll turn into a trampoline at some point. So I've got 22 is where my frame is currently set. And then only 3 frames later, she's kind of flown through the air and is pretty far away. So this tight amount of, or this few amount of frames between these 2 extreme different positions will produce speed, will produce a feeling of speed. So when you're timing things out and spacing things out, that's the 2 things to keep in mind. The farther apart things are and the less frames you have, the faster and more energy there will be. The farther your frames are apart and the less change between those frames, the slower things will feel. So when you're blocking stuff out with this stepped keyframe method, that's what you're trying to keep in mind is, are these, so like right there, she kind of floated in the air for what I would think is a little too long before catching the next thing. So I'm going to move this closer, retry it. Yeah, so that's feeling like she's getting to the pole in a decent time, to the chin-up bar. Oh, somehow it created some new joints. Oopsie doopsie. That's the other nice thing about working with a referenced rig. You don't have to worry as much about breaking it because a reference file won't let you delete anything that's like necessary. You can only add stuff. So you could, if you wanted to, come in and like add a special attribute in the scene to one of the controls. That's fine. You can work additively with references. But if I accidentally had like selected the root joint and hit delete, it won't let me do it. It'll tell you that it's locked or it's read only. So you can't break your rig as easily with a referenced file. So that's also another super positive about working this way. And so here, I'll actually, I guess, show you a little trick if you wanted to add in just some real basic animation on primitive objects. It can go a long way in kind of increasing the believability of your scene. So I'll flip back on polygons. I've positioned the pivot for this thing at the bottom. So if I were to scale this object, it would scale to the bottom. What I could do is come in and so for this frame before, we'll go ahead and key the scale values by clicking and dragging and then right clicking and saying key selected. Then on this frame, I'll actually scale it down a little bit, out a little bit, so it like smushes it. And I'll redo my controls so that they follow that. Oops, I didn't keyframe that. So highlight that, scale it down until it's looking good. Highlight these, scale it out a little bit. And then looks like my controls have some movement on them right now, which I don't want. So I hit in a little squish to that thing, so it looks like it's reacting to her. Boink. So I guess here's a place where I'm going to need to use a new tool to fix something that I'm seeing. So I've got some movement on several of my frames that I don't want. And I think it's coming from the tangents getting a little weird. See how it's spinning, and there's no keyframe information over here on the timeline. So what I can do is kind of look and see what's happening with each control using the graph editor. So the graph editor is what you use for animation a lot to adjust curves. And if you hit this Windows, Animation Editors, Graph Editor, it'll bring up this menu. And it looks like what's happening here is we've got flat. It's like these are actually behaving pretty well. Oh, it's a double keyframe. Weird. Not that it should do anything. I'll go ahead and delete that. Looks like it did do something. Huh. These also have some keyframe values, which I don't want. So just linear, switch back to stepped. It's weird. Yeah, that's a frustrating. So using the graph editor, I couldn't see any issues. I just went ahead and did the trick of middle mouse clicking earlier on the timeline, and then creating a new keyframe, which is exactly the same as this one, deleting the old keyframe because something's gone horribly wrong with it, moving this back into place, which is on frame 5, and then making sure to switch this one to stepped. Now it's not staying still. So something had gone wrong or keyframe values had gotten weird. So I just got rid of it and recreated it.
Yeah.
So if you feel like it's in a place where you want it to start.
The requirements, right? Yeah, I got mine for this week, just yesterday. So I missed it on accident.
I think you might be unmuted, Nathan.
I'm taking it very seriously, and I made the right.
Probably doesn't have headphones in.
Yeah, no problem.
Hope there's no embarrassing stuff. All right. So if you were at a phase where you wanted to start to test out and see maybe how it would look with some in-betweens, you're like, I'm pretty happy with this blocked out section. Boink. You could go and start to put in auto transitions between your two big blocked out keyframes, just to see what it would look like if you let Maya handle the heavy lifting. That's pretty good. Don't see any issues with that. Move on to the next one, which is squatting down. And then the takeoff, which might need to happen faster. So we'll see here. Ooh, okay. So it looks like I didn't have my feet's positions saved between these two. So I'll need to make sure to grab these feet, go, let's see, when's my next keyframe? Yeah, it's missing frame 15. So this 10 keyframe needs to get copied over here to 15. So that the feet stay put and it looks like it's planted the whole time. So here is my first transition where it looks like I'm moving off of the IK and it's blending into this FK legs while she flies through the air. So this leg looks like it maxes out actually even before frame 15. So I'll grab this one control, scoot it back, because then in the next frame, actually, I'll leave it where it is. In the next frame, that's where I would probably want to add in some new animation. So I actually will save that. And here in 15, it's pointed and pick it up a little bit. Here's where I'll use my handy dandy script. Go and get the ghost. So this is where the right leg is positioned here on frame 17. I come back to 15. You need to have some animation here at 16 that is going to be a little bit more believable for how the leg would move. So the previous target is here. So I need to be able to blend that to here in a little bit more believable way. Try and recreate that with the left leg here. Not bad. Okay. Let's go ahead and grab everything here. Make sure this is keyframed. Auto. Oh, okay. Boom. So here I actually don't like it going from the highest down to here. I don't like the overall movement of the root of the character. So this is where I would use the graph editor to try and adjust the translate Y, which is the up and down, so that the movement better represents kind of what would happen with gravity. So here you can see it starts out slow and it starts to speed up, and then it actually slows down again before it hits the bottom. That's not what would happen with kind of gravity. You would kind of continue to speed up until you hit the ground. So kind of comes down and sharply drops off. And I'll actually also go ahead and make him be a little more floaty. By dragging this handle out, I'm extending the time that it's kind of hanging in the air. So it doesn't start to pick up speed for another little bit of time. Yeah. Cool. And my guess would be here, just by kind of repositioning the feet a little bit, probably in this frame, I would have need to switch back to FK because the feet would be in contact with the ground by this point. So here on this frame, come in, kind of spin the feet a little bit. Put her in a good position, like she's really gonna stomp down and take off. Yeah. So it would be in this exact next frame is when the feet would contact the ground. Goes through there. Then I'll put this ghost, just so I have a little bit of reference. Dog is not happy. Spit this out. Okay, so we've got here, up to here. Grab all these. Oops. That actually might be a little fast. Put 2 more frames. There we go. Cool. So we've got about 10 more minutes, and I'll go ahead and ask if there's any questions before I sign off. I'm actually going to go and get some food. I'm actually very hungry. Suggest other people do the same. But for today, wrapping up, what I hope got sorted out is maybe some scripting help for finishing up your rig. So the ability to add in an FK chain or an IK control system to a limb. Also getting a third-party script installed. So putting a MEL file in a specific folder in your Maya structure. So in the preps scripts folder. Oh, yeah, somebody found my website. I am always hungry. So the scripts get installed there, and then hopefully if the script is written well, you can find the single command that you need to put up here so that you can start to have a little custom self of animation. That's what I have up here. A lot of these icons probably don't recognize in your Maya project because these do custom things. So like this is one that I make for characters. This is one for positioning people. You can basically make fancy regs to help out your animation process all over the place. The last thing that I was just silently working as you guys were working is blocking out some animation. So how I went from just default spacing of 5 frames, it could be 10 frames, it doesn't really matter. Once you have a certain amount of keyframes, I went 7. So I got 7 good poses of animation where I started. There's like a charge up, some downward motion, then takeoff, a landing pose. I think that was here. Then before grabbing the pull-up bar and then grabbing the pull-up bar. So those are my 7 poses that I then adjusted some of the spacing on the timeline, timing and spacing, to create my blocked out timing. And then I went in and started adding in some tweening by just highlighting my keyframes, right clicking on the individual red ticks and saying tangents, auto. And that lets Maya kind of do its best to interpolate between the 2 values that are saved. And that ends up getting you part of the way there, but you could see I was starting to have some issues when I took off from the ground. I flipped over into FK mode. So you can start to smooth out that transition of flipping back and forth and so on and so forth. So that's, it's kind of a little chunks of work is how I like to do it. So you could block out your entire scene, getting all your key poses set up if you want to. That's totally legit. And that's actually a nice thing to do when you first start out, because people can give good comments on, is your key pose reading well? So like this charge up pose, like you could really start to push this to tell the story. Like, what is this person doing? Oh, well, they're like leaning back and really getting into it to then, duck down. Is this pushing this pose far enough? So you can really tell, or you can really comment on this specific part of the process without worrying about any of the timing stuff. Like you're not even worrying about the 4th dimension, the time dimension of things. You're just worried about, does the character look good and read well in this position? Once you get that going and you're like happy with how that is, then you do start to add in that time with the blocking, and then you start to smooth it out so that it can play back at the frame rate that you want it to. Well, cool. With that, I'll stop sharing.